Order.
If people can mute their microphones when they're not talking. People can mute their microphone when they're not speaking, please.
Can you mute it?
Keith, can't you mute them?
I'm trying to mute everybody, and I'm not finding the right person.
I think it's K-A-Y. Looks like.
Okay, I think it stopped. So, Kay, if you're out there, if you can please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I can't mute her. It just unmutes whenever I do it.
Can you delete her?
I guess I could.
You have to.
No, I don't even see her listed now.
I think the reason it is you can't mute her is maybe she dialed in from a phone.
Who's that calling?
I don't even see her listed.
Yeah.
Who's this caller? User number 5.
That person's muted.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Seriously, this is crazy. We can't do this.
We'll get it straight. We'll get it straight.
All right.
Keith, can you mute everyone?
I don't see how. Let's see. just don't see who's causing this.
Oh, just,
Yeah, Keith, I think it is Kay. She was on the WebEx there, but I think what she did was dialed in on her phone separately. That's why you can't turn her off.
Because I see a bunch of call-in users and they're all muted.
Okay.
So I don't get it, but it stopped.
Yep, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
let's try it again. I'll call the meeting to order. Seated tonight are Gardner Young, Ben Philbrook, if he's on. Well, Ben, myself, Ben Philbrook, myself, David Rathman, and alternate Charles Sheehan, as of now, and also present is Michael Deasy, Ryan Deasy. Sorry, Ryan.
David, it's Lynn. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're here. Okay, and Lynn,
I've been here.
no, we couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Can you get your picture on? Put your camera on, please. There, perfect. Okay, all the 5 regular members are here with Charles Ian as alternate and Ryan Deasy. We'll start from the minutes of the May 12th meeting.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Staff report. Administrative review.
Sure. And if I can remind everyone, including myself, to try to state your name whenever you speak. Even though I just didn't do it now. I'm Keith Rhines, town planner. So the first issue here is item 4D, administrative review. 41 is commission interpretation regarding modification of existing retaining walls and building setbacks. 104 Noise Ave, Lord's Point, Assessor's Map 129, Block 8, Lot 1, Zone RM20. So this issue of retaining walls of over 3 feet in building setbacks keeps coming up. We have another situation that needs the commission's interpretation. The Zerbinis own 104 Noise Ave and Lord's Point. They have 2 existing concrete walls that are offset and terraced from each other with a patio area above. The walls they're currently failing and in need of replacement. The owners are looking to merge the 2 walls together, which would create some extra patio space, but it would be a retaining wall of over 3 feet in the building setback. Now, the wall wouldn't really be any higher than what's there now. It wouldn't really come out to the street anymore than is already there now. It's almost like the area in between the first and second wall would be filled in. There is one area in the southeast corner of the property where they propose on moving the wall a little bit closer to the neighboring property line. So that's the one location where it's not in the exact same place. And in the staff report, it shows the proposed location and the new location. The owners have said in dealing with the contractor that the wall's in really bad shape and needs to be shored up here in this manner. They're going to be staying out of the FEMA V zone and doing this. At the last meeting, the commission asked us to come up with a regulation amendment that clarified how we want to treat this in the future. That hasn't been developed yet. We'll submit something in June. It looks like in this case, the possible interpretations are either to allow the proposed modification, to allow only the modifications involving the existing retaining wall locations without their expansion, where they're not already, or to just not allow the modifications at least until there's a regulation amendment. The Zerbinis are also here at the meeting if you had any questions or wanted any more information from them.
This is Ben Philbrick. I have a couple of questions. The retaining walls that are there now, I went and looked at them today. The upper section is already over 3 feet high. If you were to keep it, if you were to merge the two walls into one plane, it would be quite a barrier, quite a wall. And if we allow that, I would suggest, can we have them put on the stone veneer as they've done with the rest of the house foundation? It looks quite nice. Otherwise, I would just suggest keeping it in the same conformation it is, because the lower section of wall that sticks out forms a nice little garden area, very small, 1.5 feet wide maybe, but it breaks up the big height of a massive wall.
Yes, to answer your question, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Michael Zerbini, 104 Noyes Avenue. Yes, that would be our intention in order to veneer that whole facade.
This is Fred Dykman. When we last spoke about retaining walls, we were dealing with a retaining wall that was interior to the property and not an obvious barrier for the rest of the neighborhood. I think this is different, and to I don't know how tall the wall would be if you combined the two, but it seems to me that we're asking for trouble if we move ahead and allow a sizable retaining wall in the setback along the street like that, visible to the neighbors. I would be hesitant to do that.
Just a reminder for people to mute their microphones if they're not talking. We're getting some background noise here.
This wall is currently there and currently abutting the street and overseeing the water. I'm not really sure who would be upset by it.
It's not going to be any higher than the existing patio wall.
This is Ben Philbrick again. What is the total height presently? Do you know?
The total height of the interior wall? From the ledge, I'm not sure. I would say somewhere between 4 and 5 feet. Keith was out there last week. Maybe you could tell by the sheets. I don't know, Keith, have they seen some of the photographs?
They,
Has the commission seen some of the photographs?
they have, you know, in the report there, I have a photograph of the wall. The wall's taken from a corner. So you see how they come together.
Is this wall on a ledge?
It's pinned on a ledge. That's correct. When it was built, it was reinforcement rods were drilled I believe is every 2 feet, and poured concrete was set over them. And I do have photographs showing that. Some of the photographs I shared with Keith.
Am I wrong in thinking that this is along a street, that the wall faces a street?
That is correct. The wall is facing the street. And there are no neighbors on the other side. There's a seawall and the water line.
This is Ben Philbrick again. There is a house not far away, correct? A neighbor across the street?
The neighbor across the street is not directly across the street. They're somewhat adjacent to us. And they are waterfront.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Does this wall fulfill a FEMA purpose? Is it protecting a house from a flood?
Are you asking me, sir?
Yes, I am.
Yes, it is. That's how it was originally designed.
Okay, so was it designed by an engineer to withstand a flood?
It was, and it was also designed with Bill Herman, architect out of Mystic, who's no longer with us.
Okay, are the modifications that you're proposing going to be designed? Because we don't have any of those details in front of us.
Yes, it will be designed by Jeremy Williamson, professional engineer, Jawa LLC out of Canterbury, Connecticut.
Because to me, this makes a difference if this is a wall that is being shored up and made more stealthy because it's protecting someone from a flood. It's not architectural only. It's really sort of essential. So to me, that differentiates this from the previous case that we looked at. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments at this time?
No, we'll have to figure, once the wall is designed, if it needs to come back to the commission as a CAM approval too, because it, in the eyes of the DEP, might be looked at as a flood and erosion control structure that needs to be approved by the commission in that manner and get referred to them. So we'll have to look into that more. This is more just an interpretation of, can they do it per zoning?
If we're going to,
Lynn, why, this is Lynn Carmen's question. Why haven't we gone to the town lawyer? So this is the second time this has come up in two consecutive meetings. I once again suggest to the board that this is something that we should bring to the town lawyer for them to interpret our regulation. And I don't see an urgency as to why we need to make a decision without going to the town lawyer to get that interpretation.
Well, I think one reason is because we're going to change the rule anyway once we submit a regulation amendment. So the applicant was looking to get guidance about whether they could do this in the more short term, and we had no real guidance for them. So, I mean, in theory, this could wait until we have a regulation amendment that's approved, which would be a few months.
We have to advertise it. It'd be 2 or 3 months down the road.
Right. It wouldn't give the applicant an answer in the short term.
no, but
Why
if,
does it have to be a regulation amendment? I thought we were just going to ask for an interpretation of our existing.
Well, I think in the last meeting, we established that we all need to decide what we want the rule to be and make it clear in the zoning regulations. The town attorney, often says it's up to the commission to interpret its regulations, and it's sort of like we don't know what we want out of a rule right now, and we've got to establish what that is, preferably in the form of a regulation amendment that spells out what people can and can't do in this situation.
if there's no danger that this is going to collapse in the next 90 days, wouldn't it make sense to wait and decide what we want to do in an overall regulation amendment rather than do this piecemeal? We're going to get ourselves in a jam with the next applicant that comes down the road if we're doing this piecemeal.
Yeah, it could make sense to do that, and that way we'll sort of be on the same page town-wide. I'll let Mr. Zerbini talk about how dire his situation is. I guess the walls could be shored up in their current configuration too, I would think.
Well, that certainly there's any option that could be done. that was not what was recommended by our concrete contractor who has done other work on the property. Someone did mention that they were witness to the veneer siding that we put on other concrete walls of our house, and that would be the intention. I would not go ahead and put veneer on this existing wall. Number one, for fear of it crumbling. Number two, it really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Will the walls hold up for 30 days? Of course they will. However, we are in the middle of our final stages of our contracting, of the construction of the reconstruction of the property. And it would be convenient for us if we could get a ruling so that we could move forward and get this work done sooner rather than later.
Gardner, what's your opinion?
I think he's muted.
You're muted.
No.
I think you muted,
Gardner.
you can unmute yourself. We can't. All right. All right. Now you're unmuted.
Oh, now I'm unmuted. Okay.
Although we didn't hear anything you said.
Okay. So now I'm unmuted. I like the concept of one wall with the veneer. I think that would look nice. And, apparently would, dovetail with what else is already there. And, I would be opposed to just putting up one wall. If there's going to be a veneer on there, I think would be nice.
We lost you.
Oh, Christ. You have me now?
Now we do.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I would be in favor of putting up one wall with a veneer. Would be my, I think it would look nice. It apparently serves a purpose of protecting the house. And, I think it would be attractive to look at.
We lost you again.
Am I back?
Yeah.
I keep apparently fading in and out.
Now you're out.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll just say yes once in a while.
Okay. All right, what's the commission's decision, discussion, and what would they like to have the outcome of this at this time?
This is Ben Philbrick, if I could speak up for a minute. I would go ahead with a veneered step wall right here, right now, so they can keep moving. If we go to a one flat wall for the entire vertical surface, then we'll have to wait till we come up with these regulations. Is that not correct?
This is Fred. I'd be good with that.
Lynn? You there, Lynn?
Hello, this is Mike Zerbini. Just to be clear, I would not be moving forward with veneering the existing wall the way it is today.
I understand that. I thought you wanted to rebuild the wall, and my proposal would be rebuild it the way it is with veneer. Meaning you lose 18 inches of patio space at floor level, at patio level. Is that not
Well,
right? Am I misinterpreting?
That creates a whole different structural engineering situation. At that juncture, that whole inner wall would have to be destroyed, removed. The patio would be destroyed and collapse, and somehow would have to shore up the house behind that wall. So the wall that is there does create some support today. However, it is deteriorating. That's why the concrete contractor, and I did have conversation with Jay Williamson, who also designed a beam that replaced a center post in our first floor. And he's familiar with our house and property. And he said, I wouldn't remove the existing wall. I would shore up that outer wall, and then you would be totally protected and you would be totally secure. We would also be tying, that new exterior wall to that interior wall so that there would be no fear of it collapsing.
So, I still don't quite understand this. The lower wall that sticks out further would not move,
No, it would not move.
and you're just adding above that, correct?
Correct.
I see. Okay, I did not.
To the same height of the existing inner wall. It wouldn't be any higher.
Understood now. Yeah, no, I understand that, but I thought the whole thing was coming down and getting rebuilt as one unit.
Oh, no.
So you're just adding on to the lower wall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To an existing wall to make it, to tie it in with the other wall.
Correct.
I have no
So
problem.
how does that add to your patio space? So you've got the wall, I'm sorry, but I turned my camera off as I went to the staff report to look at the picture again. So you've got the outer wall, then you've got a little bit of an indentation, and then you've got the inner wall. And what you're saying is that you would like to get rid of that indentation, fill it with cement, and just have the outer wall continue all the way up to the current height of the inner wall.
That is correct.
So which would be the outer wall, and then the extension would be a total of how high?
I don't have that exact measurement. It would be the existing height of what the current higher wall is today. I don't know if you have the photo in front of you.
I have to get off camera. Let me see if I can't.
We did get a photo, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a photo in the staff report. It's
Yeah.
just,
It looks like
I
about
don't have
three,
two
this is
screens,
right,
so
it
I
looks
have
like
to go
maybe
back.
3 feet or something in the photo. Eyeballing it. the most.
I'm sorry, Ryan, I missed that.
It looks like about 3 feet, and I'm just eyeballing it, trying to get a sense of scale.
That whole
You
area
thinking
is
that the
also
total would be
ledge.
about 6 feet, Ryan?
Yeah, it looks like it goes 3 feet, and then the interior wall looks roughly 3 feet. And again, I'm eyeballing, so they're adding 3. It'd be about 6, maybe.
No, excuse me, this is Ben Philbrick speaking again. I went down on my bicycle today, and immediately I was sitting on my bicycle seat. The lower wall is about 3 feet off of ledge, which is about 1.5 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong, property owners, please.
Okay.
About 1.5 feet from the ledge, from the street level. And then the upper wall must be about 5 feet. I was looking up at
Okay.
the top. I
Doesn't
couldn't
do that.
see the top. Is that about right?
Oh, maybe a total of 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, Phil, so are you saying the total is 8 feet?
No,
Oh,
5.
no.
5 feet, 5 feet. Okay, got it. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
So what is the commission's feelings on this application? And now that we've got a little more information.
I'm back where we started. I would put it off until we have a regulation amendment.
Ben?
If we could move, will we have that by the next meeting, Keith?
Yeah, we'll have that by the next meeting.
Well, we
We'll have to
cannot,
it'll be submitted. We'll have to have a public hearing sometime months from now, but we'll have it by the next meeting.
The next meeting is June 16th,
Right.
and we have to advertise, and then we'd have to advertise. We only have one meeting in July. So it would be the quickest we could do it by the first meeting in August. Is that all right, Keith?
It might be able to be that meeting in July, but first meeting in August is probably more realistic.
And then once we voted on the regulations, this would have to come back to us with the new designed wall?
It might have to come back as a coastal area management application.
It might. I'd say we have to go through this process on this one.
Decide on this one now.
No, go through the whole process as Fred mentioned, the regulation.
Okay.
Would it be-
We need more information on what the total height is.
Would it be helpful if I had the structural engineer design for your next meeting?
That would help.
Yes.
So if I went ahead and contracted Jawa and had the structural engineer design the wall, and then I could get that over to Keith, and then he could share that with the commission and see where we are at the next meeting?
It would help.
Just one option, Mr. Chairman, if I could, to spare him a little expense. If he could just have the structural engineer provide elevation views, that would be a fraction of the cost of the total design. And that would give the commission everything they need. So the elevation view that shows the stone veneer, the height, the dimensions, we don't need all of the reinforcing details or the cross sections through the wall or the design of the footings. We're just interested in how it looks from the street. So a conceptual design, not necessarily a design for construction.
Great idea.
Do I hear that motion?
Well, I don't know if we need a motion for it.
Yeah, well, we'll get back to the next meeting, if that's all right with everyone.
So if I'm understanding correctly, and to summarize, I will have a conceptual design prepared for you, Keith, in the next couple of weeks that you can share with the commission. And then we can attend next month's meeting. Would that be fair?
Right. And we'll see for that. The next meeting is June 16th. So if you can get the plans before that,
Certainly.
would be ideal.
Keith, I just want to manage expectations here. What you said was there's a possibility that no matter what the commission decides, right, in seeing these plans, that the applicant would have to come back yet again to the commission. I just want to set that expectation.
Right.
So you might want to just explain why they might have to come back again. So they don't think it's a done deal next meeting. I think we need to manage that expectation.
Yeah, if it's considered a flood and erosion control structure, it would need to come back for a CAM application. So sometimes it's a little murky what that means, per the state statutes and DEP's interpretation. So something that is considered a flood and erosion control structure would need to come back for a CAM application before the commission.
Okay, thank you.
And Keith, this is Lynn again. Who determines that so that the applicant will know that? And when is that determined so that they know?
I think when we get the more detailed plans, we will contact DEP to get their take on it as to whether it needs a CAM application.
Would you be able to tell by the existing maps that you have, the GIS maps and the elevation maps that you have?
Maybe I can try to see if they will give me any feedback on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Keith, anything else under administrative review?
No, that's it. Item 6A, the which is PZ 2006 SD. That's a subdivision on 3 Country Lane. We can just table that until the next meeting. They are planning on submitting revised plans. And we don't need a motion.
All right. Public hearings, 7A. Ben?
Would you like to go ahead with Norcia's first, or?
Right on Norcia. We're not Norcia now.
Okay. Public hearing call pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958 and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations for the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, May 26, 2020 at 7 p.m. by virtual meeting on the following applications. EZ 2002 SD and CAM, Michael Norcia, Jr., G. Fettis, subdivision and coastal area management review applications for a 3-lot subdivision of a 1.13 acre lot. Property located on Oakwood Ave, Pawcatuck, Assessors Map 5, Block 1, Lot 5, Zone RA-15, continued from 3/17/20.
The way the public hearings are run, the applicant will speak first, and then all those in favor of the application. And if there's anyone opposed to the application, they will speak second. That will have general comments, and then the applicant will have the right for rebuttal, and followed by the town planner's report. So, are we ready, Mr. Pettis?
Yes. Yes, sir. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
We can hear you.
Great. My name's Greg Fettis of Fettis Engineering. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. Working for my client, which is Riverbend Builders of Stonington, and the owner, Michael Norcia, Jr. It's an existing parcel of land on Oakwood Avenue. It's approximately 49,000 square feet. It has road frontage of the required amount for 3 lots. So there's going to be a 3-lot subdivision. The lots are approximately 16,000 square feet change. They do meet all requirements. It's a 15,000 square foot zone, 100-foot minimum lot frontage. I'm going to share, if you'd like, I'll share a drawing.
Please do.
Can everyone see that? So this is the subdivision plan. We can see that, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This is the parcel. It's located on Oakwood Avenue on the northwest side of Oakwood. So there's the 3 lots. I'm going to blow up the zoning table for the RA-15 zone. As you can see, the minimum requirements are all met. Front yard, side yard, rear yard, height, floor area ratio, and I'm going to go into the site plans for each of the lots next. So these, These are the three site plans with a proposed house and garage on each of the lots. Just to put the retaining wall issue to bed, those retaining walls will, although we don't show a specific height, if you interpret them, they are probably over 3 feet and they're in the front yard. So you can make that a condition that no retaining wall on this project will be above 3 feet within the front yards. Most likely going to remove them completely, but we did a conceptual kind of design, a feasibility design with the three houses shown. So the three houses shown, there's a driveway off of Oakwood Avenue for each of the lots. There's sewer and water for each of the lots. The proposed grading. It is a sloping piece of property that slopes from, I'd say, north to south, from the back of the property, more towards a little bit of a southern direction in Oakwood Avenue to the south. And there's definitely some drainage issues that are going to be brought up by neighbors, I would expect. But what we did was we had put 2 rain gardens on each of the properties. One, they're going to capture stormwater from the house and the garage. So leader drains would be piped directly. You can see the leader drains piping coming from the corners of the house, draining right to the rain gardens. And also the back of the property will basically be swaled, and a portion of the runoff from the graded lawn area will enter the rain garden. The town engineer did a review of the property, and one of his concerns was to see drainage calculations. We have provided that to him. The 2-year, the 10-year, and the 25-year storms were all a reduction in stormwater to Oakwood Avenue. The 50 and 100-year storms were slight increases. And I believe we've addressed, I can go through here quickly. The WPCA director, basically said there is availability for the sewer. There is an existing lateral that runs, you can see it running to the property behind us on 12 Johnson Street. That's an existing sewer lateral that runs from Oakwood Avenue, crosses through our property, and serves a house up here. We're going to relocate that to a new service along the property line and tie back in. All the work will be done on our property, and we'll provide the required easement for the WPCA and for the other homeowner in order to service it if necessary, or fix it. Then there'll be 3 new sewer services for each house. We have a letter from the town of Westerly that also provides that the plans are acceptable for new water services. We've shown 3 new water services coming from the water main. We got a review letter from DEEP on February 6, 2020. They also talked about directing downspouts to rain gardens, which we did. The driveways will not be pervious, they'll be paved. But that was taken into account in the stormwater calculations. Small portions, it's extremely difficult to get the driveways to drain to a rain garden. But we kind of went overboard on the size of rain gardens and captured all the roof water and a good portion of the yards. And I'll put up the drainage maps shortly. Well, we've shown tracking pads for each lot. we have also agreed to put the erosion and sediment controls up prior to work beginning. And I think their conclusion was that it's consistent. We see in the latest letter from CLA engineers, basically dated May 21st, 2020, states that all previous engineering comments have been addressed. Their original comments were stormwater management report, which we provided. We did dig test pits in the location of each of the 6 rain gardens, which we provided the results on the revised plans. We did not hit any ledge, and we hit a subsoil that's pretty consistent on the whole property. And we expect there's better drainage material underneath that, but did not account for the better drainage material, went with what we found. We did revise the roof leader to not dump into the stone. They'll basically dump into the rain gardens above the stone, above the material that's in the rain garden. And we added a note that we would put erosion control matting on any slopes greater than 3 to 1. However, we don't have any on the site, but if for whatever reason something needs to exist that'll be over 3 to 1, we're covered. Let me just flip to the next. So this is the erosion control plan, which basically shows the three anti-tracking pads, shows silt fence down gradient of all the disturbed areas, and then has the construction sequence and all the notes regarding erosion control and what we're going to be bound to do to basically keep silt and sediment on our site. The last sheet is the calculations of the rain garden, and then the trenching details and so forth for sanitary sewer, driveway design. These are all town of Stonington standard details. See, that's our original application, which you have in front of you. That's the property survey. I have it up ready if someone wants to talk about it. This is the letter written to Keith on May 20th and a summary basically for the stormwater. So typically we don't go into this much detail on a subdivision that's just a single family house on a 16,000 square foot lot. But we wanted to show the commission and Keith and the neighbors that we are basically, there's a reduction again for the smaller, the 2 to 10 to 25 year, which is typically what we would design for, is probably even less than that for this type of development. Typically what DEEP likes to see, and historically what most towns, and probably including Stonington, is for a single family house, you do capture the first inch of rainfall, which is what our rain gardens show, capturing at least an inch. But you can see the 2 through 25 do offer a reduction. There might be one case, lot 3, 2-year storm. There's a 0.05 of a CFS increase, but then it drops down for the 10 and 25. The 50s go up by about 0.5 CFS, and the 100 years go up by about 1.3 CFS. Again, a real drop in the bucket when you're looking at the entire watershed and Oakwood Road or Oakwood Avenue. I do have so just to address some of the conditions of the road prior to hearing from the neighbors. I'm going to just flip back to so here's the existing conditions. Basically everything kind of flows, runs to the south, and then from our property and the property above and the properties adjacent, runs to the south, gets onto Oakwood Avenue, and then runs, in theory, along the gutter line. And then at some point past or further south, it runs across to kind of a low spot. That's, to me, it looks like it's been filled with leaves or there's just no real outlet for the water to go. So it does pond there in heavy rainstorms. But that's the current situation. We feel like we're not making it any worse. The road isn't in the best condition. It's got a crown on it for a good portion of it, so it does keep the water on our side of the road. But I'm guessing at some points in the heavier storms, not necessarily water from our site, but water running down the road does get onto some of the driveways across the street. And I have photos of all those driveways. Some have a nice lip on it that prevents water from going in. Others are pretty flat and will allow water just to run down into their property. And then down further south, I guess it would be the neighbor to the south across the right of way there. They do also, discharge their roof water and looks like a footing drain down, like generally in that area of the problem area. So I feel like our 3 lots, we've gone above and beyond with the stormwater, really, taking into account the roof leaders, and again, most of the drainage. I'm just going to flip to that. That's the existing drainage for each of the lots. You can see basically everything runs to the front, to the southern corner of the lot. And then here the darker shaded area goes to rain garden 1, and then the other hatching on the lot goes to the other rain garden. So there's not a lot left over we're not basically treating and retaining a little bit and infiltrating some of it into the ground. So I think we did go above and beyond regarding stormwater. We're definitely not going to cause any problems on Oakwood Avenue from this development. There are problems. I'm not disputing that there aren't problems there now. Some of them can be fixed pretty readily with allowing some kind of outlet down below. I know the neighbors have met with the Public Works Director to talk about that. I don't know what the exact results are from her. And a couple of the driveways definitely could use a little bit of work in order to keep water on the road so it doesn't run down their properties. I think that's it, unless there's any questions regarding the project. Again, I think we got positive review letters from everyone at this point, and if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commission members at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Ben Philbrick. Where, Greg, exactly is the ponding occurring now? Can you give me a street address?
It is I know it was mentioned in one of the emails from the neighbors. Let me see. So this is 26 on the right of way here. I believe it's further. It might be the next property down to the south. It's away, but it's it's further down. I do have some photos I could bring up of it if the commission was interested. It might take me a minute.
To the south of 26 Oakwood, you say?
Yeah, definitely the south of 26.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
A question here, this is Fred Dykman. What sort of maintenance of these rain gardens is required to keep them effective over the years?
I think it's like any mulch. Some rain gardens, they put layer. It's kind of like any mulched area. You should take the mulch out, kind of freshen it up every year. So it doesn't create that matting that doesn't allow water to go through. But other than that, the plants and the design, flip to the design, and I could add, I don't know if it's on there or not, I can add a maintenance and operation and maintenance little as a condition to the rain gardens, but let me just blow that up for you. So there's a layer of crushed stone on the bottom, then a topsoil and sandy mix. So they add the sand to the topsoil so it has some porosity. And there's a layer, there's a filter fabric kind of protecting that stone. So this mulch layer, some of the contractors have been putting in like river stone instead so it doesn't float away. This is directly out of the Yukon approved rain garden detail. So we found that mulch does work. Only 3 inches of mulch, the maintenance would be, when you take care of a garden, you have to basically do something with that mulch. Otherwise, it's just going to get matted down, and you're going to want to remulch it. So
it's going to be up to the homeowners to maintain that over time, or the rain garden will cease to be effective, and we will then have water running onto Oakwood Avenue. Is that right?
Well, it wouldn't be fully ineffective because there's a pooling area. That's a good chunk of what it's doing, unless that gets filled in over time. But yes, these rain gardens are the responsibility of the homeowner.
This. So, just how does that work? Is that part of the deed? Is it a deed restriction that the rain gardens will not be moved and will be maintained? How does that work?
Keith might be better to answer that, but I think if it's part of the approved drawings, it would be required to be put in that location and required for CO. And as for the maintenance and operation maintenance of a rain garden, since we don't have specific, I don't know if we had anything. I'd have to go check the erosion and sediment control plan, but I don't think we had anything specific on this site. We'd be happy to add that. So it's part of the approval.
It's pretty hard to enforce a rain garden on a private piece of property. How would we police it?
Yeah, so this is, again, I think what we've done here is kind of best management practice originally, which was capturing the first inch of rainfall. When you have a road that you're putting in and you clearly need to deal with the stormwater with detention basins that become part, again, Keith might have a better answer to this, but I think they're required to be installed and put in and operation and maintenance. I'm not 100% sure the responsibility of that once it's approved and built. When the town takes over a road, becomes a town road, do they take ownership of the stormwater system? But in this case, yes, you're correct. It's a single family homes. This is not the typical treatment for a single family home where we have, kind of double the rain gardens, double the size, just in order to not exasperate an existing situation on Oakwood Avenue. Maybe
I could ask it in a different way. what's an alternative to having a rain garden that would have to be maintained by the owner and would not be really policed in any way, if that's the term we want to use, versus isn't there another engineering method that you could use on these lots that would have the same effect and not have that maintenance aspect to it, so that it's kind of built in?
There's some other options. We could do some underground infiltration with almost like septic system galleries that provide storage underground. We could size them accordingly so they perform the same so they perform the same, and as our calculations showed, those would require less maintenance and operation, but they'd still be a drainage structure on the site, and they'd have to have an overflow. So basically they'd be the same thing, just all underground, and there'd be some kind of overflow system if you get successive storms, or dead of winter, you have some freezing conditions and the system fills up. It's only going to infiltrate so much. So there's still some maintenance, maybe not as great, maybe not as, easy to install, but we could, typically we do get that request from contractors when they want to go build something like this. Some people don't want rain gardens. Some don't want to see any of this stuff. So there's definitely options. We'd be open to doing underground infiltration that does the same thing, but there would be. It's not going to eliminate maintenance and operation fully. If it's like anything, if it's not taken care of, it's not going to last as long or function as well.
Thank you.
Definitely the underground infiltration will be probably a little more work and a little more expensive for the owner or the developer, but would offer a better longer term solution without maintenance.
Right. Thank you. Lynn, would you turn your camera on, please, when you, anyone other questions at this time? Anyone else like to speak in favor of this application?
Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I had my mic muted. This is Chuck Sheehan. Before we get to the public input, could I ask just a couple of questions of Mr. Fettis?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I miscued on the mic there. Thank you, Greg, for the presentation. Thanks for the additional details on the drainage maps and the drainage calculations. First question is, it appears that some area to the west of this site also flows across this property. So the calculations that we saw for each lot, does it consider all of the drainage area tributary to that lot or just what's on that lot?
It's just the incremental from the existing conditions to the proposed conditions.
Have you analyzed how the systems will function based upon the total runoff, considering, that a lot of this water is coming from the west, from the other land to the west of this property across these systems, how the systems will perform when they're inundated by the additional runoff?
We did not analyze that.
It appears to be fairly significant. And to Lynn's point, what are the other options? Is it an option to put a retention basin to the west of these lots, behind these lots, that would detain? It looks to me like the real problem is not the incremental difference in these lots. That's going to exacerbate the current situation. But if you could detain the upstream water from the west side of this subdivision somehow, you could make a major improvement in this situation with a detention basin behind these lots.
Well, I'm not sure that it's our responsibility to deal with water from the lots to the northwest. Yes, there is some water coming off of there. I don't think that's the problem with Oakwood Avenue. And the lots really aren't set up to put a detention basin. One, they're not very deep. And two, it's a steady incline from, again, I would say more north to south, northwest to southeast. I'm not thinking it's our responsibility to deal with that water coming off the hill.
Isn't this all part of that same parcel that is located to the northwest of this? Isn't this land being subdivided out of that parcel?
No, that was split off. So just the original, the parcel we're dealing with is this piece, the piece with the topography on it, which is about 124 deep at the northern end and 100 feet deep.
I see the parcel we're dealing with. I thought it was part of that larger parcel because we're being asked to waive a requirement for a total A2 survey for the entire parcel.
Well, we didn't ask for that. We have an A2. Oh, we have an A2 survey for our piece.
Okay. All right.
That's what you're looking at now on the screen here.
So let me go back to the point that I'm uncomfortable with this situation only because it doesn't consider all of the runoff that's gonna come onto these parcels. You know, you may not be responsible for that upstream water that's flowing across these sites, but you do have to account for it in the design. And if by channelizing the runoff into these basins, you consider that additional runoff, I think you've got to at least take a look at that and see, how, does that create a turbulent situation within each one of these basins? I don't think you can just ignore it. And I'm not suggesting you have, but I think we've got to look at that, particularly because there's downstream issues. These things have to work. The only way you can tell if they work is if you look at the whole watershed that's contributory to them. So the numbers that you showed for each lot are not true numbers in the sense that they don't consider the offsite area that's tributary to each one of these basins. And there's going to be more water coming through those basins than is shown on the drainage sheet. So somehow I think that's got to be looked into for us to gain a comfort level that this situation will work in the real world.
Thank you, Chuck.
You bet.
Anyone else? Any other members have questions at this time? Anyone like to speak in favor of this application?
Okay, so this is Keith Brines. For the public hearing portion of this, when people want to speak, if they're on their computer, if you bring your cursor down to the little icon that looks like a person, you click on that and you'll see the row of names there. If you put your cursor near your name, you'll see a little hand that makes you be able to raise your hand. And that way we can call on you to speak. And I believe also if you're on a telephone, if you dial 9, your hand will show as raised. So these public hearings are awkward in this situation, but we'll try to get everyone to speak who wants to speak.
Anyone else? Anyone like to speak in favor? Raise your hand. You see anyone, Keith?
No.
Is anyone opposed to this application?
Keith. This is Carlene Donnarumma.
We hear you, Colleen.
I'm going to get rid of my picture so I can see everybody, so there won't be any echo. So I'm going to go out of that, but stay on the phone.
Okay.
All right. Hope I can bring up my paper now. All right, here we go. I did unmute.
Still getting echo, Carleen.
Well, can you hear me now?
Getting echo.
I am only on the phone. I am not on the computer. Is that better?
No.
Okay. Well, for the record, my name is Carleen Donnarummo. I live directly across the street from this property. And as you may know, I have followed zoning in the town of Stonington for the last 40 years. The neighborhood of Oakwood Avenue was established in the early 1950s and was carved out of a farm purchased by my grandfather and his son-in-law, John DeCesar. He supported his family of 7 children by building small, affordable, one-story, single-family homes on heavily treed lots. Yes, he used the same floor plan for a few of the houses, but you can't tell that from the outside. Each house is unique. Therefore, it concerns us that the plans show 3 very large 2,200 square foot cookie cutter houses, which we feel do not conform to the character of the neighborhood. Many of the existing homes were built for Mr. DeCesar's own children, and several of his extended family still live here. Even some of the children of the original owners have come back to live in this wonderful neighborhood. So it is a very special neighborhood. The 1-acre lot, which is the subject of tonight's public hearing, was a separate lot of the much larger holdings of Michael Norcia Sr. It is now owned by his son, Michael Norcia Jr. Although he is listed as the owner per regulations, I hope you understand that Michael is not the developer. As Mr. Fettis has stated, Riverbend Builders, whose principal is Pierce Hall, is the developer, who coincidentally is building a house on 28 Burdick Lane, which is not very far from the subject lot. He will be the eventual owner if you determine he has met all the requirements of the zoning, subdivision, and technical standards. Many of us in this neighborhood have enjoyed the heavily treed 1-acre lot for way over 50 years. So we are sad to see it develop. We will miss the deer, rabbits, squirrels, woodchuck, fox, and even the skunk which live there. But we do understand a property owner's right to sell it, as well as the developer's choice of fee in lieu of open space. Even though the FEDIS engineering letter of March 12, 2020, to our town planners states in number 9, quote, "We have added a proposed tree line to the plan set and will limit as much as possible to save existing larger trees on the perimeter and of the site and between lots. Please keep in mind that some of those larger trees are on town property. The subdivision regulations also require that substantial trees on each lot be preserved. If that is done, it would be in keeping with the neighborhood's character. We truly hope that these lots will not be clear-cut, as is apparently done on the 28 Burdick Lane property. Stonington isn't called Stonington by mistake. It is very stony, and we hope the developer will not leave piles of stone on these properties, as we have seen on his Burdick Lane project. He might want to call Shredzia an excavation, who may want his large boulders for their breakwater projects. Likewise, we hope he doesn't leave large trees lying around on the town's right-of-way, as has been the case with 28 Burdick Lane. We understand that subdivisions are a matter of right if and only if they meet all the subdivision requirements. It has been quite a job to make sure this has happened. Not having a town engineer on staff has been a huge obstacle for us, even though our concerns, especially about drainage and lack of storm drains on the street, have been transmitted to the consulting engineer. We miss Scott DeLetter, who actually came on the site when there is a problem with another neighborhood subdivision. Director of Public Works, Barbara McQuell, did visit when asked, and hopefully the flooding problem from drainage on Oakwood Avenue onto private property, being 26 Oakwood Avenue, the Hill Home, further down on Oakwood Avenue, will be solved in a timely manner. Apparently, the town does not require that all runoff from rooftops and driveways should remain on one's property. But the storm drainage from 1,179 plus square foot sloped driveways, 2 of which directly align with mine and the next door properties, remain a concern. From the drainage report I learned today by talking to Mr. DeLuca of CLA, that the developer only has to prove that he will not add more runoff than what is currently coming off the property pre-development. In other words, that runoff from the driveways will still be entering Oakwood Avenue. The driveways could have easily had galleys put in to catch the runoff, as we have done on our property, or at least been piped or pitched into the rain garden. Additionally, it really boggles one's mind why a fairly new gas line on Oakwood Avenue isn't being used to service these three houses. Propane tanks may be necessary where there is no gas service, but that is not the case on Oakwood Avenue. Quiet, efficient, safe, and no worries as to when the tank has to be filled. A gas hookup is the way to go. All I can say is, buyer beware. Handling the previous owner's sewer line that traverses this property has been a concern from day one. And today, in talking with the new owner of that sewer line, he may not be on and listening, but the town's technical standards in section 6.9 entitled easements states 6.9.1, permanent easements outside of street lines shall be a minimum of 20 feet wide, centered on the sanitary sewer main. Then it continues, for deep excavations deeper than 8 feet from flow line. Wider easements may be required, and I have no idea how deep they're going to go. The sewer line for 12 Johnson Street is proposed to be placed on Lot 3 in the 10-foot side yard setback. Regulations require that 20-foot easement as stated above. It seems that the developer is double dipping in that he is using the 10-foot side yard requirement of not only Lot 3, but also of Lot 2 to meet this requirement. Is that legal? Long ago, previous commission instituted a zoning regulation that prohibits using one requirement for two different requirements. What if either eventual property owner wishes to put in a fence or trees in this area, both of which would require digging? What about tree roots that can play havoc with underground systems, especially sewer lines? In addition, the trees between lots 2 and 3 will be destroyed to put that sewer line in. It seems that not only should the sewer authority's records be updated, but that both new property owners of lots 2 and 3 should be made aware that an easement for this sewer line exists on both of their properties, if this is even legal. I therefore respectfully request that the planner's proposed stipulation number 5 be amended to read: sewer easements, and here's the addition, on lots 2 and 3 shall be recorded on these 2 property deeds as well as on the Stonington Sewer Authority's record. And and then it continues prior to or concurrent with the subdivision plan. In dealing with this application, I see an opportunity for the commission, and by extension, the planning department, to further address two items that deserve further consideration and future amendments. And I'm glad to hear about walls over 3 feet. I hope the new proposed regulation will say where they can and cannot be located and how they are constructed. This was not addressed at all by the consulting engineer. So it leaves us wondering, in my humble opinion, there should be specific standards to follow, and hopefully that will happen. The second item involves the requirement for shadow plans per section zoning regulation 7.14.7. The sun doesn't stop shining at 3 p.m., yet that is what the regulation states. It would be more realistic if the regulation 7.14.1, 7.14.2, and 7.14.7 were amended to state shallow plans should show shadows cast from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I sincerely hope the developer will try to make these homes more compatible with the existing neighborhood, and that you and Keith will consider my recommendations for zoning amendment. Thank you for your attention, and good night.
Thank you, Colleen. Anyone else like to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone showing up, Keith?
No, and if you're on a computer, don't forget to unmute your microphone if you are trying to talk.
Hearing none. Any general comments in this application? Hearing none. Mr. Peters, would you please rebuttal? You there?
I'm not sure that, oh,
You're on.
I'm on? Okay, sorry about that. This is Greg Fettis with Fettis Engineering. There was a lot said there. I think the bottom line is we did meet all the regulations for subdivision, zoning, and the technical standards. If the easement for the sewer line needs to get worked out with the WPCA and town staff because it's not adequate, we're flexible on that account. And I did take a quick look at the, just to I think it's Commissioner Sheehan that had the questions regarding the property to the north or northwest and what drains onto our site. There is a portion of the lot to the northwest that does drain onto our property. It is wooded. It's according to GI or according to the property records, it is a house from 1900. There's several. It's probably been redone since then, but there's several tiering. Looks like tiering stone walls in the backyard that maybe were an attempt to, one, create areas in the backyard that were level, but also do help in in retaining some of the water from that development, or at least slowing it down. The balance of it is wooded. There is a ridge line where some of it goes to the street in front of it, which is Johnson. So again, I just want to reiterate that we are not responsible for the water coming off of that. I don't think that's, again, I don't think, and I don't, there isn't, that is not the problem with Oakwood Avenue in the runoff that runs down Oakwood Avenue. Previously stated, there's a crown in the road that's at some points not that great. So there is water sheet flowing across the road. And also there's no outlet. Those are the biggest problems. The amount of water that comes from the northwest is in my opinion, insignificant, and is slowed down by one, the tiered area that's developed, and two, the balance of the wooded area. Putting a detention basin on this small of a property for someone else's runoff that wasn't accounted for would be, one, is not the intent of the regulations or the stormwater regulations or the subdivision regulations. And two, it's putting an undue burden on my client for development of a retention basin along the back of these three properties. So I respectfully request that we, the town engineer approved our drainage plan per the regulations, and that we are, for the smaller storms, making it a better situation. I'd like to just comment on the driveways. It'd be a challenge to, again, we went overboard on the rain gardens to deal with stormwater from the yards as well as the roof drains and a portion of the driveways. It'd be a challenge to grade those driveways to go to a rain garden because you just don't have, one, you just don't have the lot is going uphill, and there's just not an easy way to do it without carving out even more material out of that to kind of flatten the basically flatten the lots and increasing the grading in the rear, which would cause other issues. So I think we did a nice balanced site. We took into account by far double the stormwater that a normal site would take in this case. Again, the problems, just to address the gas situation, my client doesn't have, he's not intending to tie into the gas at this time. I'm not sure that, that's a requirement right now. We have other means of getting heat to the three properties, whether it's oil or propane or electric, solar. There's plenty of options. I'm not sure that he's tied to dealing with the gas line that's in the street right now.
I have a couple questions. What is the surface of the driveways?
Bituminous concrete, asphalt.
Could you make them not bituminous concrete, asphalt?
I don't know if my client, I believe, was on the meeting.
Well, that would help in the drainage if we didn't have that blacktop driveway. And the other thing I have, the trees. Colleen mentioned a lot of large trees. There's no showing anywhere any trees are going to be saved. Which ones are on the town property? I'd like to see which ones are on the town property and to see what trees they'd be tending to save.
I've been on the Oakwood Avenue several times. The property line is not that far from the edge of pavement. And I don't recall any large trees within that right of way.
Are there any large trees on the property?
There are some larger trees. We're gonna If you follow my mouse, we're going to be saving kind of as much as we can on the back of the property. You can see the proposed tree line, and then along the along the northeastern property line here, and along the southwestern property line. There is a little bit of no grading located between the two lots. Similarly, on these, no proposed contours. So if there was an existing large tree in there, we would save it. The sewer line needs to go through there. If WPCA directs us to take down a tree that's within so many feet of the sewer line, we'll have to take that down. But we would propose between the lots, again, there's a little bit of limited grading between the lots, that we would not be taking down any trees over 6-8 inches, and that's not even a large tree, as long as they're in good health. And as for the sewer line, we're not going to be very deep with controlled by what we're tying into up on top. It might be deep at the street, but by the time we get onto our property, since the property slopes upwards, will not be that deep.
What is the reasoning of not tying into the gas lines? That doesn't make sense to me. It's the cheapest fuel there is.
Yeah, I don't know the reason behind it. I'm not sure that that's a requirement that we tie into it this time, but I guess we would relook at whether or not that's an option or not.
Thank you. Any of the other commission members have any questions at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of points I want to make. Chuck Sheehan again, Greg, and again, I thanked you when I asked you my two questions, because we didn't have the drainage calculations in advance, and that was very helpful to get that. I was not suggesting in any way that you put a drainage basin on this site. I realize it's practically impossible to do it. You couldn't do it if you had agreed to do it. I thought perhaps this was coming out of the other piece in error, and I do think though that you said you're not responsible for other people's drainage. You are responsible for taking a look at the watershed and how these systems perform in this watershed. And while it's helpful for you to tell us that the upland area above this site, the area that's still tributary to this site, is tiered, that isn't in the drainage report, and that's nowhere is that quantified. And I'm concerned as to how big that area is, how much that increases the runoff that's going to run through these systems, and what impact it's going to have. And I don't think guessing about it is the way to do it. So I just think that somehow that should be accounted for before this design, and there isn't time to ask our town engineer now to do that, but that should have been done as a part of this design. It's customary practice to look at the full watershed. And I hope you don't disagree with that.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree. I would say that, again, it wouldn't affect the design. So yes, if there was hundreds of CFS coming off the hill, it's from one single family house lot that's mostly wooded. There's a ridge line somewhere across the middle of the lot where a good majority of the water is going to Johnson Street and then coming down south of our site. The rain gardens are designed to perform. If they fill up and overflow, it sheet flows off the site like it does today. So we could evaluate, I don't know how accurately. I could do it from GIS, or I could do it from some other LiDAR information that's out there. But again, it's not going to make a difference to the design.
I don't think, the only thing that I'm concerned about is that the volume of water could double And if the volume of water doubles that's coming through these structures from surface runoff, what is the impact going to be?
Well, there's going to be no, basically whatever water's coming off of there is going to flow. Whatever doesn't get infiltrated from the rain gardens is going to overflow once the rain garden fills up.
And
Like
it won't
does,
be
like
it won't
that
get
amount of water.
turbulent. It won't create a turbulent situation.
No, because it's you're coming across. You're going to be coming across. One, you're coming through the woods. There's no defined water courses or even swales coming off of that property above. They're all sheet flow. So it's sheet flowing coming down to our property, which is again basically sheet flow down to the back of the house, where then it kind of separates and goes into kind of gentle swales that guide the water towards the rain gardens. It's not going to become turbulent. The water's going to flow down to the rain gardens. If the capacity of the rain garden is filled, it's going to sheet flow out of the rain garden towards Oakwood Avenue as it does today.
I think that's a reasonable explanation. As long as in your professional judgment, you don't think it's going to be turbulent, then that addresses my concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What would happen if all the joint property, if the trees weren't there? It was just open grass.
Above us or on our property?
If they cut down all the trees in the property behind you, what would happen with flow?
Well, if they cut it all down and they planted like a lawn on the whole thing, it would increase the runoff.
We're not going to say these trees are going to be here forever.
No, but if that property to the north gets subdivided, then you could put those same stormwater requirements on them as you did on us, and therefore, they would then be reducing and controlling their stormwater.
Well, if you just want to make a field, I mean, that's all I'm saying. Anyone else like to make any other comments?
This is Ben Philbrick. On the subdivision, are there any passive solar requirements on these houses?
Yeah, so we addressed that on the same. Remind myself of what we did here.
I haven't seen a house drawing or an elevation or a roof plan.
We did the house shadow plan, which is again per the regulations, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. At a maximum building height. And then underneath that is the passive solar orientation. Proposed buildings and new vegetation shall be sited with respect to each other and to the topography of the site so that unobstructed sunlight reaches the structure between the hours of 8 and 3.
So that means a lot of trees would have to come down in order to make the solar work effectively.
Well, you're going to take down the limit. I mean, we're not just going to clear cut the site. The trees are going to come down in order to grade the site the way it is proposed on the plan. We're not putting solar panels on these houses. It's just to allow sunlight to hit the house between the hours of 8 and 3.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
This is Lynn. Can you address the point that was made having to do with the sewer lines being kind of shared between two lots versus totally on one lot?
So we're not sharing any sewer lines for our 3 proposed houses. What happened was the owner of 12 Johnson Street, who at one point owned this property that were the subject property. So instead of Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that there was ledge to go onto Johnson Street, and this was kind of the easiest way to get a sewer to his house up here on 12 Johnson. So he connected into the existing sewer lateral and ran the line. You could see it with the hatch in it, all the way up to his house. So, which, we're going to relocate that, give him his own line, and kind of the best place to put it is near the property line. But it's got to be somewhere where it can connect in up here at the where it crosses into his property. So there's not a ton of choices, so it has to be somewhere between lots 2 and 3, between the two houses. Could we move it over a little bit one way or the other? Sure, but I don't think that makes a lot of sense. We'd run a new line from the main in the street, run it up, put a 45 on it, tie into his existing lateral, put a clean out there per WPCA regulations. And it's all done on our property. We give them an easement. We give the WPCA any kind of easement. And if they want the easement centered on the sewer line, that's fine. I typically put them off to one side, so there's a machine that can dig, and they can pile material in the 10-foot on the other side. But again, that's just more of a practical design. When you put it in the center, you have limited room on both sides. It creates problems.
Yeah, I would just think that you would want the whole easement on one lot or the other lot. And my understanding is 10 feet on one and 10 feet on the other.
That's correct.
Yeah. And I think
that's the most practical in this case.
Yeah. But it's confusing later on.
Well, it'll be recorded for each deed that they have an easement on their property. And any title search during sales, it'll come up and everyone will be fully aware of it.
But would you have to move one of the houses or something like that to put it all on one lot?
We wouldn't have to move a house, but since you're not building in that 10-foot setback, I mean, if the commission really felt that we should have it all on one lot, I wouldn't move anything. I would just take that 10-foot and flip it to the other side.
Okay.
But it would be going through the rain garden and going through the edge of their driveway. This way, it's kind of not affecting anyone's property. But we're open to it. If that's what the commission would like, we can put it all on one lot.
Question, Greg. This is Fred Dykman.
Yes, sir.
Early on in the conversation, before we got into water runoff and that sort of thing, you talked about retaining walls, and I see them on the plan next to each driveway. And you said that they could possibly be eliminated or at least kept under the 3-foot mark for retaining walls to make them conform to current regulation. You're willing to have a stipulation to that effect, are you?
Absolutely. They'll either be removed or be less than 3 feet. I was unaware of the 3-foot regulation at the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Now I'm fully aware.
Any other discussion?
Yes, this is Ben Philbrook. Just to be absolutely perfectly clear about this sewer line, it is offset from the property line between lots 2 and 3, correct, Greg?
That's correct.
You wouldn't put a fence, you couldn't put a fence down the middle of that property line anyway. It has to be. Can you? I don't know.
I mean, it depends on how the easement's written. And again, we can, if, typically we would write an easement and send it off to the town attorney, I think is how it would work. And Keith can jump in at any time. We would write an easement description and it gets approved by the town attorney or the WPCA. They may say they don't want anything built within that 20-foot easement. In that case, if you wanted a fence, you could put it, on the edge of the easement.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Keith?
Sir, just to answer a couple of questions. Zoning allows easements and sewer lines in the setbacks. So, there is something in zoning about double counting certain things. But there's nothing about prohibiting easements in the setbacks. And, there often are the best place to put them so they're not interfering with what else other people are doing on their properties. The shadow plans, for some reason, our zoning regulations do say the shadow plans go up to 3 p.m. I'm not sure why that time was chosen, if that's a standard thing or not, but it looks like it's been in our regulations since about 30 years or so. Let's see here. So we talked a lot about the comments that we received already. Our consulting engineer did say that his comments were addressed that he had before. The Conservation Commission recommended a fee in lieu of open space for this application, meaning that instead of setting aside land as open space, they'll pay a fee to the town can use for open space elsewhere. The fees based upon an appraisal that the applicant will have done on the property. DEP's Office of Long Island Sound Programs reviewed this, recommended directing downspouts to the rain gardens, which they did in their plans. WPCA.
On pervious surface of the gravel of the driveways, don't you think that would make a lot more sense from this property? Because we're trying to hold all the water possible on the site.
It might. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, it's possible you could use pervious asphalt. If they're tied to asphalt, you could use pervious asphalt.
Okay, I think we need a pervious surfaces rather than.
Right, I agree. Pervious asphalt is available.
Thanks. Go ahead, Keith. Sorry to interrupt.
For sure. Pawcatuck Fire Department didn't have any issues with this application. As far as the actions required here, there's a decision on the requested subdivision waivers. As far as what waiver there is, it looks like it's just for having sidewalks along the street frontage, which doesn't really make sense in this area. There's no sidewalks in this area. Although a supermajority vote is needed to vote on the waiver. There's also a decision on the coastal area management application and a decision on the subdivision itself. So the report on page 17 lists draft recommended stipulations. You've all seen them, but just to paraphrase them, number one is final plan shall include new street addresses and assessor's lot numbers. Number two, provide the AutoCAD drawings or a fee in lieu of the AutoCAD drawings to update the tax assessor's maps. Number three is the standard language for the fee in lieu of open space. Number four is the requirement for an erosion and sedimentation control bond prior to them getting any zoning permits, and that amount will be established by the town engineer. Number 5 was the sewer easement shall be recorded prior to or concurrent with the subdivision plans. And the sewer easement will be, as someone said, reviewed by the town attorney and the WPCA. And the WPCA will have to approve of the relocation of the sewer line also, so they'll be aware of that and will review it. Number 6 was as-built plans for the relocated sewer line shall be provided to the town prior to the issuance of a zoning permit for construction of Lot 3, just to make sure the sewer line has been moved before the house for Lot 3 is developed. Now, some other stipulations I heard tonight was Mr. Dykeman mentioned number 7, retaining walls shall be under 3 feet tall and building setbacks. There could also be a number 8 that was mentioned by Mr. Fettis, that the final plans shall show retention of larger trees in the area between lots 1 and 2. Also, number 9, mentioned by Mr. Fettis, was final plan shall include a rain garden maintenance plan.
Keith, I think we should discuss, I'd much rather see the galleys in lieu of the rain gardens. I think it makes a lot more sense for this property. I think we have to decide, do we want galleys or we want rain gardens? And I'd like to see the impervious driveways.
Okay, I mean, if the commission wants to see the galleys, we'll probably take a revision of the plans to come back before you, because we'd have to have our engineering consultant look at what is come up with. But
why wouldn't, I mean, it seems to me that rain gardens are something that the homeowner can maintain. I'm not sure galleys could be maintained without calling in somebody to do that. So I think that's be a burden that we don't want to place on the future homeowners.
Well, let's get Chuck's opinion on it.
I agree with the galleys, Mr. Chairman. I think that the rain gardens in this case could actually be more of a burden to maintain. The one benefit to rain gardens is there's some bioremediation that takes place within the rain garden, some treatment, of the water before it's discharged. But I think over the long term, best maintenance practices in those gardens is going to be much more expensive than the minor assistance that would be required to clean out sumps in a drainage galley system. And in the long run, I think the life cycle function of the galleys would be much better. It's more appropriate for a residential lot.
Mr. Chairman, this is Greg Fettis. May I weigh in on this subject?
Yes.
I think we would agree to do galleys, and what we also agreed to do instead of some kind of pervious driveway is put a trench drain right above the right-of-way line and tie that into the galleys also. So instead of, and we could size it accordingly, we would ask that this gets worked out between staff and the town engineer, then instead of coming back if possible.
Thank you. Keith, go ahead, continue.
okay. Well, I think that was it for the recommended stipulations. Although that would be an additional one if you want to take Mr. Fettis up on that the plan shall be revised to feature galleys instead of rain gardens and shall be reviewed to the satisfaction of the town's consulting engineer. Oh, and also that the driveway shall feature galleys, which would be connected. Excuse me, the driveway, I'm saying this wrong, but the driveways will,
What he said, Keith, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What he said was there'll be trench drains installed at the head of the driveway, the lower end of the driveway, which will be directed into the galley system. And I think it's a reasonable request that he makes that this be coordinated with staff post any action on this application.
That's right. That would be the stipulation number 10 would cover all that.
Any further discussion?
Yes, this is Ben Philbrook calling. Wouldn't number 9 be the galleys, and there would be no final rain garden maintenance under number 9? So there'd be a total of 9 stipulations.
Yes, that is a good catch.
Anyone, any other questions? This is the last chance for the alternates to have any questions on this application. Are they through with questions, Ryan or Chuck?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. My thanks to Mr. Fettis for the complete presentation and all the additional details.
Thank you.
And this is Ryan. I'm good. I have no questions at this time.
Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second? Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Do I hear a motion on this application?
Motion to approve the application with the stipulations as outlined by Keith.
Do I hear a second?
Excuse me, just to clarify, if that includes the requested waivers and the coastal area management application also.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
And this would be the subdivision waivers with the no sidewalks, the CAM vote, and then the actual subdivision application with the 9 stipulations. Correct, everybody?
Yes.
That's right.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ben, you're up.
Okay, item number 2. PZ 2008S UP Rebecca Tizakaris, excuse my pronunciation, D Divine, special use permit application for relocation of a liquor store from 44 Williams Ave to 55 Williams Ave. Property located at 55 Williams Ave, Mystic, Assessors Map 161, Block 20, Lot 6, Zone LS-5.
Is the applicant here?
Oh, yes, they were here. Let's see.
You got someone down here. In June. Oh, it's June.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Yes. Brent and Diane Devine?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Mr. Devine, you there?
Yes.
All right. You're up.
Okay, we want to move our store from 44 Williams Avenue over to 55 Williams Avenue. And we're looking for some waivers and approval on a special use permit. We're not changing the outside of the structure at all. The parking, the drainage, the lighting, the signage, everything is going to remain the same except with a different name on the signs.
Are you going to add any trees or anything, any planting around it?
No.
Right ahead. Continue.
So the other waivers, the architectural elevation, stormwater drainage, erosion, archaeology study, soils report, the shadow plan, the scale three-dimensional model or graphic equivalent, the flood hazard report, and the phasing requirements for projects over 24 dwelling units. As everything is already existing there.
Does the commission have any on this application?
How wide is the current curb cut? With the store.
Hold on one second. It's approximately 20 feet wide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions at this time?
Mr. Devine, just for the record, what was your first name?
Brent.
Oh, thank you.
This is Ben Philbrook one more time. There wouldn't be any additional signage or lighting for the liquor store, the new liquor store?
No exterior, no.
Thank you.
What about lit lighting in windows, etc.?
I'm sorry?
Lighted in the windows.
What about often in liquor stores you have lit lighting in the windows?
You know how we had the bear sign?
Yes. We would probably put some of those in the windows. The windows are very small, so we wouldn't be able to put much in there. It'd be less than what we have at our current store across the street.
But if you were to change the windows later on, do they have
There's
to
no
come
intention of that.
like that?
Yeah, there's no intention of changing any of the structure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? Is anyone opposed to this application? Any general comments on this application? Keith?
Okay, one second, I'm getting a message here. Mr. Burridge, can we hear you? I unmuted you.
Keith, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Generally, no opposition to the relocating the package store. I'm the property owner directly in their backyard. I've been living here since 1979. The one thing I would request, and hopefully it's a reasonable request, is we've got a 6-foot stockade fence on the property line that was put up several owners before the existing owner. It became in disrepair. The current owners replaced it at my request. We shared the expense several years ago. I would request that they be responsible for maintaining the fence so that we've got an appropriate barrier between our properties.
I don't see a problem with that.
And then my only other question was, which Keith had answered for me earlier today, they weren't proposing any exterior modifications to the property. In the past with the restaurant operation, the exhaust equipment on the restaurant and the HVAC equipment on the roof has been an issue at times with noise. If anything like that for additional refrigeration or et cetera is proposed, I would just hope that consideration be given to adequately buffer the sound to the rear of the property.
There is going to be 2 refrigeration units added, but the 2 of the existing refrigeration units are not going to be used. And the new units are going to be on the side of the building, not on the back of the building. And the exhaust system that they use for the kitchen will not be used any longer, will be removed.
So there is new refrigeration equipment proposed for the exterior of the building?
There is.
I'm not seeing that depicted on the proposed plan you submitted with the application.
Yes, it's clearly stated on the plan. The 12-door walk-in cooler.
Oh, so that's on the side of the building. So my question is,
that's inside the building. That's not outside the building. No refrigeration is added outside the building. That's inside.
Okay, so you're not proposing any refrigeration on the exterior of the building?
Correct.
Okay, yep, that was my concern. So I'm all set.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Keith, your turn.
Sure. And for the record, that was Bob Burridge who spoke in public comments.
Sorry, Keith.
So, this property is in the flood hazard area, FEMA Zone AE. What they're doing seems to be fine as long as they don't exceed substantial improvement with what they're doing. So a recommended stipulation is just that building improvements shall comply with all relevant flood hazard requirements. And again, I don't think that's going to be an issue with this at all. We did not receive any comments of interest from anyone we sent this application to. It complies with the zoning regulations. Just being a liquor establishment, it needs a special use permit to do this. The parking is about double what they need for a retail use. The hours are going to be lesser than it was when it was a restaurant, and possibly with less negative impacts here. And really no other impacts with the lack of changes to the site, really. And the decisions here are just the decision concerning the waivers requested and the decision concerning the special use permit itself. And Mr. Devine listed those waivers that they are requesting.
Keith, this is Lynn. What is duration? Is there a permanent outside dumpster?
I believe there is one to the west of the building. I thought I saw that in the picture here.
The dumpster are you talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there is one. It would be in the same location.
So it's the same that the building currently has, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And if I may, I just want to point out what a much safer situation it will be from a traffic standpoint, as cars won't be backing out onto Route 1 any longer. There's an in and out on the driveway. There's plenty of room for cars to pull in and turn and drive out of the driveway instead of backing out onto Route 1.
That's an excellent point.
Yep, definitely.
Lot better location.
Yes, lot better location.
Yes.
Any other questions at this time? Do I hear a motion? Karen.
To close the public hearing.
There a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do I hear a motion for the application?
I make a motion to accept this application with the waivers and the stipulations about the flood zones that Keith mentioned.
And the special use permit.
Excuse me, and the special use permit. Thank you.
I will second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Hey, Keith. We're getting this echo again.
It's horrible.
Keith. You hear me?
Are you getting it? Are you still getting it now?
No.
Yeah, I think the applicants may have had two different phone lines.
No, we have.
Back.
Let's come back because I muted them and unmuted them. That might have been the issue.
We only have one phone going.
Okay. We had the same issue with the previous caller who was just very echoey and I couldn't figure out why.
You're echoing.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all are now. It's just, I don't know. Well, now almost everyone is unmuted.
We gotta figure some way to take care of that.
Yeah. We'll have to work on our echoing situation.
Good night, Mr. Chairman. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
June 16th.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
16. Got it. Thank you. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.